Good evening, class. Tonight we are going to be discussing Praxial music education. We're going to be looking at 3 different essays in David Elliott's book, Praxial Music Education, Reflections and Dialogues. Tonight we're going to dissect this, looking at 3 different essays, and then compare and contrast them and go over a brief summary of what music praxialism is. Let's start with Wayne D. Moven. Through Wayne D. Moven, we find out the discussion that praxial music education, as he sees it, is too strict, too varied, or as he says, praxial knowledge is the understanding of variable situations within human action, virtuous conduct. But in response to Eliot, thus procedural knowledge, musicianship, or how we know, lies at the heart of all musical practices, and yet their specific manifestations are always situated or culturally specific. He goes on to explain that David Elliott continuously talks about music culturalism, pulling it into praxialism, and that of course it has to be music culturalism, because how else would we understand what we are learning? But that through our cultural understanding is how we learn music as it is. If we move forward to Koopman, the nature of music and musical works, he also brings up our cultures, but in the way of discussing babble in babies and our language acquisition. If we compare our understanding of music to language acquisition, Koopman states that we should be learning music in the same manner. We should be listening, using pictures, words, symbols, understanding and grasping the musical concepts, then applying them. One statement by Koopman is, since action is a nonverbal form of thinking and knowing, which is intentional in nature, musical performing, improvising, conducting, and so forth can be defined as to act thoughtfully and knowingly. He continuously brings the conversation back to babies mimicking with babble. As the babies babble, if they keep a steady beat, then everybody kind of starts to move together in time. The same with if we are making music together and understanding music, keeping a steady beat, eventually we are all going to be moving together in time. That goes right into Music and Knowledge and Bodily Experiences by Westerland and Jeantonin, who discuss Dalcroze and the idea of movement in our bodies and our language and our music acquisition all intertwined. A statement by these two is, your body is an instrument for being a social human being as well as an expression of it. The body both generates and expresses imposed sociality. All 3 authors discuss how our culture affects us, so that by David Elliott stating that culture is an important part of praxialism, they're stating, of course it is. Of course it is. How else would we come to a performance? Now, Koopman also takes it back and says that David Elliott has said that we start with performance and we break it down to understand what musical components we need in order to build up to a quality performance that is thoughtful, thought-provoking, and also reflects on how we are doing for us to be able to change and use our mental ability to show our skill. Koopman says that should be the opposite way. We should start with our understanding, and through our understanding, we want to perform. We are going to give our best presentation. We give it at our highest level. It is natural for us to do so, to want to do so. Likewise, it is not necessarily natural for everyone to perform. So Bowman does make the statement that praxialism, which is doing, can be done in a multitude of ways to present, that a performance for performance sake does not have to be the be all end all. Performances can be very anxiety inducing. They can be uncomfortable for people. And in some cultures, there is no big performance. Instead, you have participatory music, which in its own sense results in a performance. Therefore, Elliot, needing that performance doesn't always fit into our cultural norms. The West, it may, but not the rest of the world, making music multicultural, but also understanding that there are different ways of producing that. In summary, Praxialism is doing. However, it's not just the doing or what we are doing, but it is the how we are doing it. Praxialism results in presentation, not just necessarily in concert, but it does result in a presentation. It leads to self-knowledge and self-growth. It's purposeful music action. And it must be related to culture and how people are doing music. When we relate to musical feeling, we cannot have music without that feeling. Music's worth can be gauged only in reference to specific human needs and interests. It's Bowman. Music feeling is effective expression. Koopman says it functions as supplement to performance. It transforms a brilliant technical execution into a musical performance. And music has an impact on our physical and mental state. That's Westerland and Juntanen. If we bring this down to musical understanding, which is the core of what we are talking about, instruction must ensure that musical's procedural nature must be grasped, says Bowman. The ability to modify one's viewpoint when new information is learned is what musical understanding is. Koopman says that musical understanding should be developed in the same way that infants develop speech. And Westerland and Juntanen say, as we understand how music impacts our bodies, we can use music to transform ourselves. If we take this and look at this in a worldview, a Christian worldview, if we look at the Bible, we see that King David organized and supported the Levites to be skilled temple musicians. He had an expectation of them to teach at a certain level, to learn at a certain level, and to execute at a certain level. 1 Chronicles 15:22 and 25:7 both highlight the skill and training of musicians. And Psalm 33:3 encourages skillful playing, not just making music, but with quality. So remember, Praxial music is doing, not just the what are we doing, but the how are we doing.